Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, we can do better than that. Good evening.
Good evening.
We are in for an exciting evening tonight, so I'm so glad that you're here. Happy Women's Entrepreneurship Week, right? Yay! Woo-hoo! Absolutely. So we know entrepreneurship is at the core of America's history. And it's people like our today's speaker who really make owning your own business so exciting and inspiring for all of us. We know that at Lindenwood, we're committed to entrepreneurship and innovation. That was one of the things I was really, really excited about when I joined on July 1st. And by the way, everyone who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Emily Pitts, the new Chief Diversity Officer. So I have the honor of introducing someone who's presenting to others, to women who exemplify, she exemplifies women who have the true spirit of entrepreneurship because of her passion to do what she loves that's making such a positive impact on the communities that she serves. Amy Mills was raised on smoke, sauce, and magic dust. She is the heiress to the 17th Street Barbecue Empire, and she is the go-to girl for all things barbecue. She is the recipient of the coveted coveted Barbecue Heroine Prize. And she leads the 17th Street Barbecue, as well as she runs OnCue Consulting, the only business consultancy in the world, the only barbecue business consultancy in the world, offering seminars and training in the culinary techniques behind barbecue. So, okay, I thought I could cook. I make really good barbecue, at least all my friends say so, but that could be because they're my friends. But I have the pleasure of really introducing to some and presenting to others the true barbecue queen. So without further ado, Amy Mills.
There is plenty of room for multiple barbecue queens in this world. Certainly you are one of them. Absolutely. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you this evening and with all my friends who are tuning in as well. Thank you so much for having me here at the Plaster School of Business at Lindenwood and in this magnificent ITEN program celebrating women entrepreneurs. It really is an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm going to spend the next 50 minutes or so telling you a little bit about 17th Street and the journey that took me from there to here. And we'll leave certainly plenty of room at the end for questions and answers as well. As Emily mentioned, I own 17th Street Barbecue, the factory at 17th Street, which you'll hear about at the end, and OnCue Consulting. During this talk, I'm going to talk to you about my family and foundation, the winding path I've taken throughout my career, the critical moments and highlights and steps that got me from there to here, and I'm going to impart a few best practices and practical advice. In this picture, I am about the age of all the students in this room. I was at Mizzou Rock. I'm in my dorm room here at Schurz Hall, and I am shown here with one of my friends, Trisha Miller. I met her on my dorm floor. This kind of will harken right back to networking, one of my tenants. You never know who you're going to meet sitting next to you in a class or living on your dorm room floor. But Trisha and I are both journalism students in this photo, and we had big, big plans. At this moment, I was studying broadcast journalism, and I thought I would probably end up on the anchor desk at Good Morning America eventually. That was the plan. And as you can see, that did not happen. Trisha is from Washington, Missouri. She came from a newspaper family. She ended up becoming the editor and publisher of the St. Louis Business Journal. So I'd say she did all right. And now she is actually back in Washington, Missouri, out of retirement and running her family newspaper. I am a product of this man, Mike Mills. And working with him side by side for the past 21 years has just been such an immense honor and privilege. Everything I know about working, about a work ethic, came right here. And I am also the product of these two women. My Mama Faye, my paternal grandmother, and Jeanette Hudgens on the right. This is Molly Hudgens' mother. Molly is the dean of the business school here, and she's the one who invited me to speak tonight. So hi, Molly, I hope you are tuning in since you are not here this evening. I had to get that in. These two women are were forces to be reckoned with. And so much of my personality, my traits, the good and the not so good, and the strong parts of my personality were certainly shaped and formed by these two women. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight are some of the keys to my personal success and professional success. And these are the things that we're going to discuss. Paying attention in class, gathering and learning from real-world experience, learning to write properly. Good grammar is so important. Learning to distill ideas and being able to articulate them clearly. Building and learning to lead a strong team, building and nurturing relationships, continuing to evolve and innovate, and developing good habits and best practices. And I'll share just a few of mine. The signs that illustrate this talk, if you follow us on social media at 17th Street BBQ on Instagram and all of the above, are called Sunday sermons, and we post these every Sunday morning. Most of these go viral, and people love these little bits of inspiration. They're shared around the world. It's been a really fun thing. And this particular one speaks to me always. You never know what's ahead of you, but it's always going to involve some work. Nothing ever, ever, ever comes easy. Building real world experience is important. Even though many of you are interested in becoming an entrepreneur, the skills that you learn working for someone else are critical. The good bosses you'll have, the bad bosses you'll have, the wonderful coworkers, and the ones who aren't so great. You will learn from every single person and every single job experience. My career path really started as a teenager when I worked for my uncle at Mills Distributing Company, which was a catalog showroom that Walmart put out of business. But one of everything lined the shelves. You could go there and buy small appliances and photography equipment. You could buy your wedding ring and register for your wedding china, and buy all kinds of gifts as well as health and beauty aids. Basically everything Walmart has to offer. After graduating from high school, I went on to Mizzou, and I worked during school two jobs. One at the journalism school assisting the dean, and the second at a clothing store called The Attic, where I spent all my money on the cute clothes they sold. Obviously, the business or working at the J School was wonderful for networking and really getting to know professors. Working at The Attic was a test of patience because the people who ran that store ran a very tight ship, and one that I did not always agree with, but I persevered, and it really became a wonderful relationship. After I graduated, I moved to Dallas, and my first job was at Tracy Locke Advertising, which is quite a large advertising agency. At that time, was part of the Omnicom group. I'm not sure if it still is. But I dreamed that I would land at Tracy Locke, and I would either work in the creative department or in account services. This was during the late 80s, and there were no jobs available in either of those departments, but there was a job open as a copy editor in the traffic department. So I interviewed for that job. As part of the interview process, I had to take a copy editing test, which involved reading some ads that were being produced there. And little did I know, as I marked up all the errors I found, I actually found an error that their lead copywriter or copy editor did not catch. So that caught their attention. I also had to speak with a woman in print production as part of this interview process. And in that talk, I was able to reach back in my brain and talk to her about some things I learned in Graphic Design 101, which I thought were useless pieces of information at the time. And those were about printing processes. So we talked about rotogravures, that's how newspapers were printed at that time, offset printing or color process, how to produce mechanicals and get things ready to be printed properly. Catching that error and knowing about print production landed me a job in the traffic department. And what I came to realize was that what a great place that was to be, because that was sort of the brain of an ad agency. You shepherded jobs from the creative brief all the way through client approvals and then turning it over to be printed or produced. So I really learned about the entire process every step of the way. And soon, when there was a job available in account services, I was promoted to an assistant account executive. I left that job because I moved to Boston. And in Boston, my first job there was at State Street Research and Management Company, one of the oldest mutual fund companies in America. I was not very interested in financial services, but I was hired to be in the corporate communications department there. And one of my first tasks was to buy a fleet of Macintosh computers, a very newfangled thing then. I set them all up for myself and for the 2 copywriters there. And we were all sent off to Quark Express training. Quark Express is now InDesign, for those of you who know Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, et cetera. It's an Adobe product. But one of the first things I did was to take all of the materials that got printed monthly and convert them into Quark Express documents so we could update them in-house. We didn't have to pay design firms to update those items any longer. We also did work with outside design firms. So drawing on my experience as an account executive, I managed those relationships and I bought tons and tons and tons of printing for all the different collateral materials that we produced for State Street Research. I left that job to move to Talbot's. My home in Boston was in Hingham, Massachusetts, and that's an hour commute on a boat, which was wonderful, but an hour each way every day. And I thought I would be getting those 2 hours back into my life because my new job was going to be 1 mile from my house. And that is not exactly what happened, because what I learned is that at Talbot's, we worked late into the night every night. So those hours all of a sudden were spent working. Talbot's had mail order catalogs, but they also were in the middle of opening many, many, many stores across the country. And my job in the creative department was helping open those new stores and working on all the sales and collateral materials for the store openings. I was recruited away from that job to a company called DM Management. It was started by an executive from Talbot's who left and bought 14 mail order catalogs. By the time I got to that company, they had winnowed that down to 4 catalogs. And there I learned all about the catalog world. It was a very, very small company, so I got to wear lots of hats and had my fingers in all parts of the creative process, from the time the merchandise was turned over to us, to helping plan photo shoots and making sure that things got packed appropriately for those shoots, managing relationships with outside designers, and then of course, finishing off all that work with a team using Quark Express on Macintosh computers right in-house. All of the things that I learned in so many of my J-School classes really benefited me throughout all of this. Graphic Design 101, Advertising Principles, News 101, where I really learned how to write. The skills I learned in those classes, not only did I use in all of these jobs, but I use them still every single day. So at the same time I was doing all of these things, I was becoming an entrepreneur on the side. Always very creative. The first thing I did was create picture frames that I gold leafed and decorated with scraps of designer materials. And I sold those to gift shops in the Boston area all the way down to Charlotte, North Carolina. I designed Christmas cards and stationery and logos and all kinds of brochures for friends and new friends, people who were also becoming entrepreneurs. I very quickly figured out that those Christmas cards, I was making no money on that. Printing is very expensive. I was not charging enough money to make enough money. So I invested in actual books of stationery, and I would have little parties where all my friends could come and order their cards and stationery. I started, at that time, my dad would also start calling me, and he would have me write a little ad here and there, or write some copy or a letter, or read a contract. So little tiny dribs and drabs of 17th Street started creeping in. I started a junior cotillion program in my town and several surrounding towns, teaching ballroom dancing and etiquette to middle school students. I quickly figured out that I was making about $1 an hour doing that. Not very lucrative, but it was lots of fun. But one of the fathers who came to help pour the punch one evening said, "This is so fascinating. Would you come and teach some of these skills at my company?" The rules of etiquette are the same whether you're a child or an adult. And I quickly figured out that it's much more lucrative to work with adults, and thus the proper manner was born. So for the next 15 years, on my days off, on weekends and vacation days, I would fly across the country and produce these seminars for companies and at corporate retreats and conventions. I worked in part with my now ex-husband in that company, and around that time, late 90s, I was getting divorced, and this company became embroiled in those proceedings. So there was a period of time when I couldn't operate the company, and we had actually landed this giant contract to train all of the new management consultants at a big firm in Virginia. And that contract was going to allow me to quit my job at DM Management, which I did. So while I could not really run that company during this time, I started freelance copywriting for people and companies all around the Boston area. And this is when I really came back to 17th Street. In all of these jobs, plus the other work I did, this is where I acquired years and years of advertising, marketing, and PR skills to bring to the table. That work at 17th Street all happened because of a Post-it note. I was back in Southern Illinois visiting. My dad handed me this little Post-it note and said, "Hey, would you call this woman back for me?" And so I called, and a very lovely woman answered the phone, and she happened to be a journalist working on an article for Martha Stewart Living magazine, talking about mail order barbecue. She said, "Thank you for calling me back, but I called 3 weeks ago and my article is already written." I was so frustrated, and I said, "Daddy, start giving me all those little notes and I'll follow up." And that was really the start of my official work at 17th Street. So backing up, I want to tell you a little bit about my family's history and foundation. This is my grandfather, Leon Mills, my dad's dad. And by day, he was a salesman for the Palmolive Peat Company. He sold cigarettes and soap suds all over Southeast Missouri and surrounding states. But by evening and weekends, he was an entrepreneur as well. We had a family barbecue sauce that he bottled and sold, and he loved to barbecue. When the neighbors saw him out starting a fire, they would all show up with all of their meat, and he would cook it for them, and they would then come later and pick it up. Sadly, he died when my dad was 7. That left my Mama Faye at home with 3 of her 5 children still at home, and she kicked into high entrepreneurial gear. She continued to make and bottle and sell that barbecue sauce, and she also became the first Fuller brush woman in the country. Fuller brushes were beautiful wood brushes, much like all the brushes that we buy at the grocery store today to scrub our pots and pans or do all kinds of cleaning with. Those weren't available that way then, and she sold those brushes door to door, even taking a taxi cab into neighboring towns to walk and knock on doors and sell them. There are many moments and steps that mark the path, and here are just a few critical ones. My dad also became very entrepreneurial. He built barbecue pits out of 55-gallon barrels and sold them when he was in high school. He studied dental technology in college, learning how to make crowns and dental prosthetics, and he opened the Murfreesboro Dental Lab in the early 60s. That lab was actually one of the longest running businesses in Murfreesboro. We just closed the doors to that lab in the fall of 2019. He kept it going even after he segued into restaurant work full-time because he had 2 people who worked there and those people needed to have a job. So as long as they wanted to work, the dental lab stayed open. At that dental lab, he cooked every day. People would come up for lunch knowing that something delicious would be served. And he also would barbecue on the weekends. People would bring him meat and he would cook for free. He would work on class reunions or family parties, you know, any type of bulk meat cooking that people needed or wanted. He bought an old gas station while still running the dental lab, and he called it the Corner Tavern. And this became a place where he and his friends would meet up every morning and have coffee. And they'd all gather again in the afternoon after work and have a beer before they went back home. On the weekends, he would barbecue and have fish fries or make big vats of chili, and he would give that food away in order to sell more alcohol. In the mid-1980s, he bought the tavern that became 17th Street. Originally known as Ellis Tavern, it's now 100 years old. We're the 4th owners. And for over the 100 years, there has always been a barbecue sandwich and hamburgers sold in that location. When I was little, women and children didn't go into this bar, but you could pull around to this drive-through that still exists today. There's no intercom. You just press a doorbell, a home doorbell, and somebody will come to the window. And it was a huge treat to pull up to that window and bring home bags of hamburgers and barbecues. Today, you can get our entire menu through that window, still with that same doorbell. Another hugely pivotal moment was starting the Murfreesboro Barbecue Cook-Off. My dad and some of his very civic-minded friends, looking at the state of our town and seeing that lots of mom and pop stores were closing and things were looking a little grim, decided to start this contest knowing that people would travel from all over the country to come and cook. They would stay in our hotels, they would buy a tank of gas, they might go to the grocery store or shop in some other store or business that was located there. This past September, we celebrated our 33rd annual Praise the Lord Murfreesboro Barbecue Cook-Off. We had 90 teams participating in 3 contests that spanned 3 days. And if you run some economic impact formulas, you can see that over the past 33 years, this has injected over $3 million into our town's economy. So it's become a very important fall festival for our town. My dad and his friends knew that in order to get teams to come and compete in this contest, they had to meet those teams. And of course, this is before the internet. So the only way to do this was to form a team themselves and to go out and cook. They would meet their neighbors and entice them to come and cook in Murfreesboro. They got bit by the barbecue bug very quickly, and in their 5th contest, they won all 3 categories, grand champion overall, and an entry into Memphis in May, which was really the big time. They knew over 250 teams would be cooking in that contest, and they decided if they got in the top 75, that wouldn't be too embarrassing. They went and participated, and they were fortunate. I always get goosebumps when I tell this. They got the first perfect score ever. They won their category, which was ribs, and they were awarded grand champion overall. They were the first team above the Mason-Dixon line to win this contest. And the headline of the Memphis Commercial Appeal read, "What's the world coming to when a bunch of Yankees beat you at your own game in your own backyard?" The rest is history. They swept that contest 4 more times and were the winningest team in barbecue, a record they held for 13 years until someone tied their record. It's important to note at this time, you know, now there are hundreds of contests you can participate in every weekend, but back at this time in the late 80s and early 90s, there were not as many contests going on. So even though there are teams with many more trophies today, no one out of the gate has had the success that Apple City Barbecue enjoyed. One of the things that my dad knew intuitively from the get-go is that teamwork makes the dream work. And he was so fortunate and smart in hiring incredible people to work at 17th Street. We are really lucky today that about a third of our staff, even during these pandemic ravaged times, have been with us from 9 to 22 years. In fact, one person told me this week she's starting her 23rd year at 17th Street. It's pretty unbelievable, especially in the restaurant world. My role in all of this has sometimes been hard to articulate, and I love this paragraph. It's a very generous paragraph from a magazine called The Local Palate. Amy has managed to package both the restaurant and her father's role as soothsayer into a blockbuster brand that's recognized around the barbecue circuit and beyond. Very generous words, and here's how I did that. I applied everything I learned at 17th Street, everything I learned in my real world jobs to 17th Street. I began defining and articulating our platform and our vision. I developed that platform and continued to help build and nurture the network. One of the tenets of our platform is shining a spotlight on Southern Illinois. It's really at the baseline of everything we do, because we know that what is good for 17th Street is good for Southern Illinois, and it brings people to our area. Every time we win some sort of award or accolade, people come to eat our food, and they travel from all over the world. The night before we closed due to the pandemic, we had someone from the country Hungary in our restaurant because he wanted to learn about our classes and eat our barbecue. It's pretty unbelievable. Writing Peace, Love, and Barbecue is another thing that really elevated our brand. When I came back to the barbecue world, all of a sudden, many stories and people who were quite uninteresting to me as I was growing up became fascinating. I loved hearing all of these stories, and it all just took on a larger importance. It became very personal to me to help tell these stories. And I could see by going to the bookstore all the time that there were really no books about barbecue that delved deep into the personalities that I knew. So I decided to write a book about it. And what I did was go to Barnes & Noble, and I pulled out all the cookbooks I liked, and I sat on the floor and I read the acknowledgments, knowing that those authors always thank their agent in the acknowledgments. And I sat there, made a big mess and a big grid of who I perceived to be agents with whom I would like to work. I bought a book called How to Write a Book Proposal. And I went home and wrote a book proposal, and I followed the instructions in that book, and I began querying agents. At that time, it was very verboten to email them. You had to send a written letter with a synopsis of your book and sort of, proof of professionalism and proof of platform to the agents. And I picked the first name on my list, and I sent off a package. Her name was Doe Cooper, and she happened to be in Western Massachusetts. She was the editor for a man named Chris Schlesinger, who was a hotshot chef in Boston, and who also had a barbecue restaurant called the East Coast Grill. And he and Doc Willoughby, who worked for Gourmet magazine at that time, wrote a wonderful book that is a classic called Thrill of the Grill. Doe wrote me the nicest letter back and said, I love your idea, but I can't represent you because I already have a barbecue author in my stable. You need to find someone who does not. Great advice. So I go to the next name on my list, Jane Distel. Jane Distel is like this tiny, petite, hotshot agent in New York with a whiskey and cigarettes voice. And she called me after receiving my package and said, would love to meet with you. So I was thrilled. In the meantime, before I went to New York to meet with her, I traveled to Aspen to help my dad and Blue Smoke work or produce some events for the Aspen Wine and Food Festival. And sitting on the mountainside with a new friend, networking, a new friend named Carolyn Carreño, who is a James Beard award-winning journalist and very prolific cookbook author. I told her that I had a dream of writing a cookbook, and I told her about my book and that I was going to New York soon to meet with this agent. And she said, oh, wow, that's great. Don't sign with that agent until you've met my agent. She very generously arranged an introduction to her agent named Janice Dono. And the next week I went to New York and met with them both. I loved meeting Jane. It was a real thrill to be, kind of wooed by this hotshot New York City agent. But Janice Dono turned out to be a force to be reckoned with. She's from Memphis. She knew all about barbecue, and we just really clicked. She is also really tough, exactly the kind of agent, and tough in the best way possible. She is the agent that you want. My dad was very fond of saying, that Janice, she's so tough, she could bite a 16-penny nail in two. So I signed with Janice, and the rest is history. Traveling the country, interviewing all of our friends, working on this book, all of that was such a thrill. It was such hard work. And the reason I knew how to write this book and put this all together is because I approached it, this 8-chapter book, like putting together 8 catalogs. I took all the photographs for the book. I labored over every word. And the day that this received a James Beard Foundation nomination was one of the proudest days we have ever had. This book also really elevated 17th Street. All of a sudden, when you have a book, you're more of an expert. You get all kinds of press opportunities. It puts you on a whole new playing field. During this whole time, we're also building the network and nurturing those relationships. And I'm going to tell you about a few of the very important relationships we've had along the way. You're absolutely a sum of your friends and people you hang out with the most, for sure. I'm sure you've all read that little axiom, you're the sum part of the 5 people you're closest to. So it's important to choose those people wisely. This is one of my favorite pictures and one of my favorite times. This was at our book party for our 2nd book. This is at Porchlight in New York City. And here we are surrounded by, the best and the brightest in the barbecue world. And these are people who have been with us coming up through barbecue, through thick and thin. And while they're all here celebrating this wonderful time with us, at least half of that group traveled to Murfreesboro this past summer when we had my dad's memorial service and, carried me along and lifted me up during a very sad time as well. So choose your tribe wisely. They will lift you up and carry you along. This has been such a fun friendship, Jeffrey Steinberg. He's the food critic of Vogue magazine, and you might have seen him judging Iron Chef. Jeffrey and my dad met in the early 90s when Jeffrey was a judge at Memphis in May, and he was covering the event for Vogue magazine. He ate all kinds of barbecue, and he thought he tasted the best barbecue ever in the world, and he could not believe that some of the barbecue he judged didn't win. So he came in search of who did win. And by the time he found my dad, all of our barbecue was long eaten by people who surround you after you win this contest. My dad promised to send him some ribs in the mail, and I don't know how long later, 9 months later, a year later, an article comes out in Vogue magazine detailing Jeffrey's experience judging, and the whole last paragraph talks about going to the door in a pristine white bathrobe, taking possession of this FedEx package, heating up the ribs as instructed, pouring on a little sauce, and devouring racks of ribs with sauce running down his face onto his white bathrobe. And one of the last lines in this little essay said, "Now I understood." This relationship has continued on for all of these years. We were fortunate throughout many years of the Big Apple Barbecue Block Party, which we'll talk about in a moment. We were able to entertain him and visit with him yearly. When we went to the James Beard Foundation Awards, Jeffrey took me shoe shopping, which is an essay I wrote about and praised the Lord, looking for the perfect pair of high heels to wear that night. It was quite a funny experience, as you might imagine. And in the picture on the left, my dad is showing Jeffrey a prototype of a pit he developed with Old Hickory pits. Those are the pits we use, and they're made in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. My dad made sure that Jeffrey took possession of pit number 00000001, And delivering that to him in his Greenwich Village garden apartment is a whole nother story. We also have a really interesting Broadway connection that led us straight to Blue Smoke. This is Tom Bertel and his companion, Pat Daly. Tom is the Tony Award-winning producer of The Producers and Hairspray and a variety of other award-winning smash Broadway hits. He's also a barbecue fanatic, and he met my dad when he was a judge at the Jack Daniels contest in 1992. They became fast friends, and their paths crisscrossed over the years at Memphis in May, and they also traveled to Murfreesboro and judged at our contest a number of times. Tom's dream was to have Mike Mills' Barbecue in New York City, and unknowingly, unbeknownst to my dad, he reached out to a number of restaurateurs and said, hey, would you be interested in opening a barbecue restaurant? This is long before there was barbecue there, and he had no takers. Tom's producing partner's name is Rocco Landisman, and he grew up in St. Louis. Rocco said, you know, I grew up with this guy named Danny Meyer. We went to high school together. He has Union Square Cafe and Gramercy Tavern. He might be interested in barbecue. At least he'll know about it. So Tom and Pat arranged a little dinner party when a Cardinals game was on. Danny's a huge Cardinals fan. They asked my dad to send barbecue. He had no idea why. And Danny tasted the barbecue. He was very intrigued, thinking, like, if this tastes this good reheated, what does it taste like from the source? At that time, he was starting to open his third and fourth restaurants, Tabla and 11 Madison Park. And he wasn't really interested in a fifth project, but he remembered the barbecue. And soon enough, he took his own pilgrimage to Murfreesboro, along with some of his top chefs, and tried our barbecue. That led him and this group on a barbecue odyssey through Texas, the Carolinas, Kansas City, Memphis, and right back to our door in Murfreesboro, where they asked my dad if he would become the consulting pitmaster and help them open Blue Smoke. You might recognize this Shake Shack. This is the first Shake Shack in St. Louis that opened maybe 2017 in the Central West End. So this is Blue Smoke. This is on East 27th Street between Park and Lex. Sadly, this location closed permanently during the pandemic, which is very sad. It was probably in its 17th year. And one of the things that happened during the opening of Blue Smoke is that it was probably the first Danny Meyer restaurant that did not open to great acclaim. Barbecue was not quite understood, and it did not get great reviews at first. One way of soothing the ruffled feathers and really helping the media understand barbecue is the Union Square Hospitality Group, and Danny and the Blue Smoke crew, with my dad's help, decided to start the Big Apple Barbecue Block Party. And the first year, it was right on the street in front of this restaurant, between Park and Lex. The whole street was closed down, and there were 5 of us cooking barbecue for the weekend. We really had no idea what to expect. But what we found out is that 10,000 hungry New Yorkers were going to come and eat every morsel of food that we could produce as fast as we could produce it. In the basement of Blue Smoke is a jazz club called the Jazz Standard. And while all of this was happening outside, all of these pitmasters and some other foodie type people were downstairs at Jazz Standard, participating in some media panels and talking about the barbecue world in seminars moderated by John T. Edge of the Southern Foodways Alliance. Those seminars were one of a kind and so special, and they made such an impact. And this was one of my favorite things that was ever written about that. It's not often that a group like this gets together. I kept thinking morbidly that if someone had taken out the Jazz Standard that day, it would be a far more tragic loss to American culture than, say, the same thing happening to the US Congress. This was in 2003, long before any of the turmoil that has happened in this world today. This was written by Stephen Shaw, who was the founder and culinary director of eGullet, which was the food message board of its time, long before Facebook. And as my son reminded me, Mark Zuckerberg, was he even born then? He wasn't in college even. So this was very, very high praise, and we knew something really special was happening. Over the course of the next 16 years, this event would morph and grow. It would move to surround Madison Square Park, a few blocks away, and there would be 16 pitmasters, all serving our very special brand of barbecue. You could go on a 15,000-mile road trip right in this park and taste the very best barbecue that this country had to offer. One of the things that was so special about this is it really elevated barbecue because it gave the media a chance to meet and mingle and really spend time with all of these pitmasters. They were never going to come to each of our respective little tiny towns and places and learn about barbecue. We were all right there, delivered to them on a silver platter. One of the things that happened as a result of that is that I met some casting directors, and I was invited to audition for a new Food Network show called Best in Smoke. This premiered, I believe, in 2010, and it was really one of the first competition shows to focus strictly on barbecue. This was a food challenge show, and I have never, in all the TV I have done since then, participated in something that was so intricately produced as this. This poor group of people was sent from catering for VIPs in an underground room at Yankee Stadium to trying to operate a food cart for 3 hours in Battery Square Park, to feeding the cast of Mamma Mia, and then going to an art opening and feeding the patrons there. And some of that would all be happening in one day. It was quite a production. After that, because of my experience there and because of meeting Beth Schiff, who is the gorgeous redhead on my right, Beth is casting director for Chopped, and she later cast me on that show as a judge. I did several episodes of their Grill Masters series, and this has been by far the most recognizable thing that I've done. Chopped is the #1 Food Network show. Children love it, adults love it. I've been stopped on airplanes because someone recognized me from Chopped, and I really wasn't even on it that long. So it's really surprising the reach this show has. Those shows led to all of these shows. And the best thing about these shows is that they air over and over and over again. And someone is always seeing one of those shows for the first time. That leads people to their iPad or their computer to research where all of these people are from. It causes orders to come in on our online store, and it leads people right to our door because people love eating food that's been shown on TV. So some of those shows include Fire Masters, Barbecue Brawl, Beat Bobby Flay, more Barbecue Brawl, tons of fun and lots of hard work to be on these shows for sure. Another highlight has been our little town of Murfreesboro, population 8,000, being named the official barbecue capital of Illinois. Is anyone in here from Illinois? A few people. You know that Chicago is the machine that runs Illinois, and there is certainly some good barbecue in Chicago. But our local state senator, Terry Bryant, proposed legislation back in 2014 based on a very long, rich tradition of barbecue in Murfreesboro, that we be designated this official barbecue capital, and it's probably the only thing both sides of the aisle have agreed upon since. So we're very proud of these signs that lead you into our town. During all of this, running restaurants and catering and an event center is something that we've been doing since 1985. But it's very important to keep evolving and keep innovating. We all have heard the term change or die. You cannot just do one thing. And here are some of the ways that we have continued to evolve and innovate. In 2009, I started these OnCue classes. I noticed that people continually traveled to Murfreesboro asking for my dad, wanting to sit and learn at the foot of the master, and he loved talking barbecue. He would talk barbecue all day long to anyone. to the detriment of our own business often. And sometimes I would go looking for him and there he would be off showing everybody all of our secrets. So I decided, drawing on my proper manner skills in producing workshops and seminars, we're going to monetize that. And we began teaching these business of barbecue classes. People loved them. We taught them some of our cooking techniques, not trying to tell them, we showed them what we did, but what we're hoping is people would say, I like that, but I'm going to cook hotter, or I'm going to cook slower, or this is my rub, this is my sauce. We were never trying to have people copy what we did, but just setting them up with tools for success. Because the very best barbecue is what pleases your palate. And we wanted people to learn from our mistakes so they could go off and make different mistakes. In addition to cooking skills, we taught little mini seminars on branding, marketing, PR, food costing, all different things that go into running a business. People came to these classes who wanted to be in the business or who already were in the business and they knew they could just learn a few things to improve their business. And even some very storied 50-year-old barbecue restaurants would come. Again, the smartest people know that you can go to a seminar and learn just one thing that could transform your business or make you thousands and thousands of dollars. People loved the classes and they wanted more. So we formed a catering masterclass that just focused on catering. And then a whole hog extravaganza / brisket bonanza, where we brought in lots of our friends from the barbecue world, and we would all cook different styles of whole hogs and different styles of brisket so that people could, again, have this barbecue road trip all in one place. And all of these classes were focused on the business of barbecue. So really, not a cooking class or something that you could do in your backyard, but really cooking for a restaurant and running a restaurant business. We published our second book, Praise the Lard, in May of 2017. And while Peace, Love, and Barbecue is the story of us, but also 53 of our best barbecue friends, Praise the Lard is a much more personal book. It is a love letter to our family and to our town, and it really parallels mine and my dad's journey through the barbecue world. I'm really proud of this book, and I'm so glad that we had the chance to capture all of those memories and all of that information before he passed away. In 2015, I had this idea that we needed to take control of our barbecue sauce. We were selling it in our restaurants, and we sold it to Blue Smoke, who then used it in their restaurant. And we sold it in about 50 grocery stores, but it did not taste the same because we co-packed it with another company. So using our recipe, and then all the ways that they re-engineered our recipe to make money for them, not so much for us, the barbecue sauce did not quite taste the same. So I had this idea, we would take control of the sauce, we could become a co-packer people liked and who would keep the integrity of people's recipes, and that could be another revenue stream for our business. Unbeknownst to me, my dad bought a very dilapidated building around the corner from our restaurant. Could have probably done better had we just started over with a new building, but part of the goal was to restore and renovate and really have a showpiece right on our main street and hopefully inspire other people to buy old buildings and fix them up as well. We had lots of fits and starts with this project, contractors who quit, so many things happened. But in January, the sauce factory portion of this opened, the back 2/3 of this building. The facade that you see here is going to be a coffee shop. And as my son and I left town today, they had poured the concrete floor. So all the electrical and plumbing is in. And I would say end of first quarter 2022, we should be serving coffee and breakfast out of the front of this building. The modeling part, and this was a bright side of the pandemic, once we got a new contractor, they finished this all very quickly, and bottles of sauce are rolling off these conveyor belts. We will probably take on co-packing at the end of 2022. Right now, we're just working on getting our own processes down and continuing to staff up. So what I've been showing you today is absolutely the highlight reel. So please know that for all of these highs that I've shown you, there's an equally low low. Things have happened, tragedies have happened, money has been lost, fires, robberies. I can't even tell you all the things. There's always a danger of giving a talk like this and you think this is just all smooth sailing, and that is just so not the case. We're so proud of the highs, and we're equally proud to have powered through the lows. Here are a few more important tips. Become painfully aware of your shortcomings. Hire people who are smarter than you. Hire consultants who can help you. Surround yourself with the best and brightest. You become that group of people. Cultivate a habit of discipline. This is probably the hardest habit you will ever have in your life. The person who is the most disciplined is the person who is the most successful. The person who comes in every day and takes one tiny step forward, even if it's just an inch, because they're doing what they know has to be done. This is the hardest thing to learn by far. I feel like I'm still learning this every day. It will stand you in good stead. Be an optimist. The one with the most hope is always the leader, and lead with that optimism, but remember to act based on reality. Your external team is as critical as your internal team. The relationships you form with your banker, with your accountant, with your insurance agent, all of those people who help your business run are so, so important. I was never happier during this pandemic, 3 days into being closed, when one of our bankers called and said, "What do you need? Can you meet your payroll this week? Do you need money?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I do need money." And the money was there. So that would never have happened without years and years and years of developing relationships and helping that group of people along with their success as well. One thing that no one ever really talks about is that entrepreneurship is lonely sometimes. You're all by yourself in this game. So cultivate your personal friendships and your professional friendships. Those will become so important to you. Generosity is a recipe for success, and that is one of the tenets by which we operate, and one thing I learned from my dad. He believed in this so deeply. We are invested in the success of our town, of our region. We know that what is good for us is good for them, and vice versa. We are committed to supporting teachers and preachers, is what we say. We will support every church and every school in our town and in our surrounding towns. That is what creates our local business, and that's what keeps us in business. All of these awards and accolades are great, but it's the local business, day in, day out, that keeps the lights on. The secret to your success is found in your daily routine. So those good habits that you cultivate are super important. I'm a huge believer in the Daily Gratitude Journal, and I have filled dozens of these books, the 5-Minute Journal. You can find this online at the5minutejournal.com. I love these little books, and I use them daily. Become a voracious reader. Read for pleasure, read business books. Personal and professional development is super important. I am a lifelong learner, and I love going to seminars. And my favorite seminar with all the females in this room is called the Southern Sea. I go every February. It's in Sea Island, Georgia, which is a gorgeous place. And this event hosts several hundred female entrepreneurs from all over the South and all types of businesses. I learn so much. I get re-energized. It's just the perfect start to my year every year. One of the favorite programs I've ever been part of is the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. It was a very rigorous interview process I had to go through to be accepted into this program, and it's really like a mini business school. I know all about the creative side of things, but I was a little shaky on the numbers, and going through this program really helped me gain so much more financial perspective about our business. And finally, volunteer work is so important. We spend a lot of time supporting volunteer organizations in our community, and I personally serve on 2 committees, Murfreesboro Main Street and Revitalize 62966. Both of those organizations are committed to making our town a better place in which to live and conduct business. We're focused on attracting new business to town and really spiffing up our Main Street and our facilities. And that has been incredibly rewarding work. Develop your mantras. At 17th Street, we are cheerfully flexible. We would never have made it through this pandemic without being cheerfully flexible. Again, about generosity. And finally, always asking, how can I help? Helping other people, putting out the hand, giving the advice, pointing someone in the direction of another company that might be appropriate for them. All of those things make us a leader in our industry, and they really make 17th Street tick. People know they can reach out. We are just a phone call or email away. So here are all the things we discussed. We know you're going to pay attention. You're going to go out and work. The world needs you to be working right now, so please go get a job if you don't have one. A part-time job would be awesome. Learn to write and speak properly and articulately. Good grammar is so important. The world still notices good grammar. I was having my nails done before I went here, and I saw horrible grammar flashing across the scene from NBC. Could not believe, like, where is the copy editor? People do notice. And learn the difference of using I and me. It is a huge indicator of educational level. And I hear it at every level of education, people who misuse I and me. Teamwork is everything. Never stop networking. Evolve and innovate. Develop those good habits and best practices, and give until it hurts. I never dreamed when I was that girl at Mizzou standing in Schurz Hall with my friend Trisha that I would be back at 17th Street running that company today. And it has been such an honor and a pleasure. I have loved my time living in Boston. I still have my home there, and I haven't been there in a year and a half. It's where I raise my children, and they'll always be a part of my heart that is there. But there's something about returning to your roots and making a difference in your town, being near your family, that just rings true, and it means the world to me to be back there. So my charge for each of you is to create a grand vision. Create the highest, grandest vision possible for your life, because what you believe is what you will become. Thank you. And I would love to answer any questions. Yes.
I really appreciate you mentioning, the fact that entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, and there's just as many low points as the high ones that you shared with us. So that's one thing that we're passionate about at ITEN, and is doing programming that is transparent about that and helping people understand the journey is full of the highs and lows. So I would love to hear if you're willing to share some more details about one of the lows and what you think helped you get through it, and what you should pull from the highs to help manage those lows.
Oh my goodness, so many lows. Which low shall I choose?
If you might put a percentage on it, like how much is low and how much is high? 50-50?
I think every day is a low and a high. And some days are a little even, and boy, are those good days. I don't know that I can put a percentage to it, but I will tell you that most of the mistakes we have made have involved people. And one thing that we have learned, and I actually learned this axiom from one of my favorite barbecue people in Lockhart, Texas, Rick Schmidt from Christ Market. He was on the board of an electric company, and he would go to all of their yearly meetings and conferences and sit in seminars. And one of the things he heard was, you would know in 2 weeks if someone is going to work out or not. And it usually takes 2 years to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And I would say we are slow learners at 17th Street, so it might take us 5 years. Mm-hmm. And we really started trying to move people out more quickly, because you do know. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just need the warm body. Sometimes, you know, there's all kinds of reasons why you don't cut someone loose when you need to. And it's you always wish, you never are glad you kept them for 2 more weeks or 1 more year. So be slow to hire, really get to know a person, and quick to fire. And, you know, we have been burned many, 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 many times by employees. And mostly that was because we weren't paying attention and we overlooked things because you needed the warm bodies.
Any other questions?
I have another one if nobody else.
I have like 16. But, so first of all, you're incredibly humble because what you've accomplished is very, very. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You are very humble because what you've accomplished is incredible. And I'm curious if you're familiar with Casa di Porco in Sao Paulo, because they are ranked number 17 in the world as a barbecue restaurant. And to me, you're better. And I'm just, it makes me curious, where are you guys going from here? What's the next step? What do you plan? And, you know, because I think you can accomplish anything. And if you'll allow me, after you answer, to ask one more question.
Absolutely. So I'm not familiar with that place, but I would love to be, because obviously trying new barbecue and making new barbecue friends is a passion. So I'm going to write that name down. Where is that located?
Sao Paulo, Brazil. Thank you, Brazil.
Oh, Sao Paulo. I thought you were saying South Hollow. Got it. No, I'm not. I'll have to go there.
There's one in Argentina.
I'm gonna put that on my list for sure. I would love to do that. Yeah, let's go. My sorority sisters back there, we can go on a road trip or a plane trip. I forget the question. Where am I going from here?
So where you're going from here?
So that is a great question. At one time, we had 4 restaurants, and we had 4 restaurants in Las Vegas. So I've skipped over so many things. We'd be here all day if I told you the whole story. But what I've learned is that barbecue is a culture, not a concept. And we were not successful when we had all of those barbecue restaurants for a variety of reasons. We had one restaurant in the Metro East area in O'Fallon, Illinois. And it was a restaurant that we took over after a different barbecue restaurant went out of business in that location, which rule number 1, don't open the same kind of business in the same location. So that's a really bad idea. We didn't know it at the time. And what I learned is that we kept moving people there to work and they wanted to come back home. So then we tried to hire locally and they didn't drink our Kool-Aid. They did not understand our culture and it did not feel like 17th Street. And we started investing so much time in this restaurant that was an hour and a half away. We could not get there easily or quickly. And, you know, that was all to the detriment of our thriving restaurants in other places. At the same time, we had a restaurant in Sparta, Illinois, about 45 minutes away at the World Shooting Complex, which was an $80 million boondoggle of a deal. It's the world's largest skeet and trap shooting line. And we ran the restaurant there for several years. We got there because the people who were running it left in the night and they needed help. And we understood why they left in the night after we got into it. So here we are with 4 places and 2 are really a struggle. And we opted not to renew the contract at the shooting place. It was out, so many issues. And then we finally just pulled the plug on the O'Fallon restaurant. And that was such a hard thing for us to do. We had never closed a restaurant before, but it was going nowhere fast. And interestingly, we continued to pay the rent for 3 more years because we were in a lease situation. We own our other properties, but this was a lease situation. And the person who owned the property kept trying to rent it to other restaurateurs. And many of them wanted it, but they wanted us to be involved with them. And we're like, we don't want to be involved. That's why we're quitting this. So they could never rent it again as a restaurant. This is not a good location. And the minute we paid the last check, they tore it down and now we built medical offices there. So expansion in this way is not something in which we're interested in. We get calls from mayors all the time. There are lots from all parts of the country wanting us to bring 17th Street there. And what we know is that we're really good at what we can manage right at home in these two restaurants that are 20 miles apart from one another. I think what I've learned during this pandemic is that it's more important than ever to be diverse in what you do. So just think if I would have had all of those restaurants during this pandemic, we might be out of business. It would be not good. This barbecue sauce factory, the coffee shop, maybe a coffee roastery is next. I don't know. Something is next. Not sure what it is.
So Amy,
Yes, Paul.
Amy and I went to high school together. I'm from Murfreesboro. I need to come and see her, but you know, it's an amazing story that you told, and like you said, you see these pictures. I mean, this is a little hole in the wall, 17th Street. I grew up 3 blocks away. It used to be a fish store right next to where the place is there now. When I was a kid, I bought fish there. But I think it's interesting because I know when you talked about your lows and you guys are bringing that up, during the time with the pandemic, I know I talked to you and you're like, you know, we're trying to figure out what to do here. And I know your decision was the best thing to do was we just need to let people go, save money, talk to the bank, because we're just going to spend all our money trying to keep our drive-through going or whatever. So I'm curious about how you got through that time. And I also know you talked about the online business and those types of things. I do know that that is a big part of your company, and how 17th Street is doing well. So I'm curious about those two things together.
Sure, thank you. Closing our restaurant during the pandemic and choosing not to keep that drive-through open was a devastating decision. And I mean, it's like a knife through the heart. I thought it would be okay. My cousin actually owns the Dairy Queen across the street from us, and he's shoveling in, like the line is down Walnut Street. But our drive-through wasn't that busy. And the first few days were very, very low. I think everyone went to the grocery store, stockpiled all that food, and no one was eating out. And what I decided was that we could give our staff a break. We could let them right away get on unemployment, and we could just take a deep breath. So we went from 106 to 5 employees, which was a shock. And the first thing that happened was we decided to do some renovations. We thought, oh, we're only going to be closed a little bit. Now would be a great time to tear out all these old bathrooms and retile them. And we need a new walk-in. So we embarked on some capital expenditure projects that I might not have taken on had I known that we would be closed for much longer than those 2 weeks. But what happened immediately is that mail order took off. So luckily, we had set a foundation with technology that stood us in very good stead. We had a great shopping cart. We had invested in great photography over the years. And we had this Toast POS system that allowed us to do some cooking for local pickups. And local people could get online and order from that Toast POS system. So had we not had all of that, it would have taken money and time to get all of that up to speed. But luckily, we had already invested in those things. So for the first few weeks, I was packing and shipping, and I started making mistakes. Like you ordered a t-shirt and you ordered some sauce and you got each other's package. And then somebody would let me know and I would say, just keep it and you'll get yours tomorrow, you know, we'll get that out. We did have a skeleton crew who was able to cook all the food that we were shipping out. So we shipped ribs, pulled pork, and baked beans. And then other people had to start coming up and checking my work because I was messing up. I would lay out all the orders every day and someone would come behind me and just double check and make sure that everything was going in these boxes properly. But pretty quickly, we would be doing that for 5 hours a day. So the first hire back was the person who packed and shipped all the food and all the mail orders. So we were really happy to see her come back to work. And then we started doing the 17th Street Family and Friends, where we partnered with some other people in the area, the pie shop, some of the orchards with their apple butters and fruits. There's a farmer's market person called Big Nutty Hogs, and we had some of his meats and bacon and eggs. And you could order these packs and come pick them up on Fridays or Saturdays. And so one week might be nachos and everything you needed to make these barbecue nachos, plus all these other items. We had growlers of beer from our local breweries, different cocktails when we started to be able to sell cocktails to go. We had some of our signature cocktails in mason jars. And so that was kind of a fun thing to do. And it just helped us stay in the game. It was a lot of work for probably not a lot of financial reward, but it was a hard reward for sure. And people loved that we were including other people in the area in these packages. So long story short, closing was tough, tougher than I ever knew it would be. In Illinois, our rules, again, governed by other parts of our state, were very strict and stringent. So, you know, we had to close the second time, and that time we were closed for 79 days. That was really rough. We could only be outside, and it was the dead of winter. But we did power through. And part of that is thanks to this incredible team that we have, because when we first started calling people back to work, they were having a good time at home. Everybody enjoyed that. And they were like, already? It's time to come back. But no one said no. That core team that we have is just really, really incredible. And, you know, we wouldn't be here without them, for sure. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I got so into your answer.
Thank you. This has just been amazing. You have a wonderful journey and story. I'm just sitting in awe of the evolution of everything that you've accomplished. And you started to talk about your people, and that's the question I wanted to ask, is the culture. As we know, Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because it sounds like you have an amazing team. You've been able to retain people in hard times. They were happy to come back and all of this. And just listening to you talk, I can see why they would want to come back. But can you speak a little bit about your culture?
Sure. Culture is everything. And one of the slides I didn't show you is this poster that we have that says barbecue is a culture, not a concept. That word, I'm gonna have a barbecue concept that is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. It's so much more about the culture. You can eat some mediocre barbecue in a wonderful place surrounded by your family and friends, and you had the best night ever. And we all know everybody, you know, even bad barbecue is somebody's favorite. No two barbecues are the same. It's such a uniquely American food group, for sure. You know, the people we have, it is not because we pay the most. If any of them are listening, they will tell you we do not. We try to be very fair, and we're trying to do better in some of those areas. But I feel like we're a great place to work. You know, we have a weekly meeting, and one of our workers has to bring her daughter to the meeting because she doesn't have childcare that day, but she wants to be at the meeting. And so we have that. We have taken, we've had these opportunities to travel the country, which are highly unique. We have taken so many people on their first plane ride, on their first trips to New York City, you know, all over the country, meeting and eating barbecue and putting together food itineraries and, you know, going to a place and eating everything on the menu and then really talking about what we eat and, you know, how that informs our education and what we know and what we think about this world in which we're operating. It's fun to come to work. People are nice. It's very self-selecting. People who don't fit in are not there very long. But I also love seeing on Facebook and on Instagram groups of people who work together at 17th Street, who get together and go to each other's weddings, who are still friends, who maybe they moved away, but when they come back, that group is all together again. And you sort of have these groups and eras of people who've traveled through our company and are not with us. We have that group who's going to stay for a long time. And then we have a group who might be there because they're college students. So they might be there from 1 to 6 years, depending on what kind of program they're in. We have people who worked for us in college and they're teachers, and now they come back in the summers and still want to work at 17th Street. So I don't know that you can define it. I wish that we could define it or model it or say, this is what you have to do. But whatever it is that we're doing is working. And I think it's really based upon an incredible amount of selecting the right people, a lot of mutual respect, and just treating people the way you would want to be treated.
You mentioned.
Oh, it's very efficient. Turn it off.
You mentioned selecting people a couple times, right? So, and I do think that's super important. You mentioned that was one of the ways that can go wrong the quickest. For everybody here, I mean, what tips do you have for how to do that well, since you guys have been doing it for a long time and you have found a good group of people who maintain that culture so far?
I think that what my dad was very talented at from the get-go, and it's something that Danny Meyer has articulated so well in his book, Setting the Table, and it's hiring the 51%er. So if you are hiring for personality and then training for skill, if you like the person, if they have a great personality, if they have that EQ, that emotional quotient that is so important, you can train somebody to do almost anything in the restaurant world. But you have to start with what's in here instead of what's up here.
One virtual question.
One virtual question.
Of course.
It sounds like she may know you.
Great.
Amy, please share what you've done to the area under the water tower this past summer.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do that. I was the fortunate recipient of some railroad remediation work. Across the street from our event center, which is called the Warehouse, we have a catering kitchen, 2 event rooms, our mail order business, our offices. It's really sort of the brain of 17th Street. We own this parcel of land, and that's where we hold our barbecue cook-off, and that's where we park for events. And that land was contaminated by the railroad years ago, and they needed to remediate it. So initially, they wanted to come and just cover the whole thing with asphalt. And that meant taking out all of the grass, all of the trees, all of the light poles and electricity, and all the things that we had engineered to hold these events. And so when I explained what we use that for, they so kindly brought in a landscape architect and helped us design this unbelievable space that has buried electricity and all the proper voltage. So when people plug in, it doesn't blow the whole thing up. Right now, it's all the gravel that has been there is being dug up, and all the plantings are going in. So it really is like a beautiful park and green space. And we are very grateful and thankful to the railroad for helping us facilitate that.
And Amy, she said she loved your holiday packages, partnering with other local businesses as well. Her name is Wendy Barlow, and she is from Murfreesboro.
Yes, she is. Hi, Wendy. You're so nice. Wendy lives in the Chicagoland area, and she is a hotshot consultant, seminar leader. She worked for Accenture, and now she has her own consulting firm.
Anybody else? Any questions?
I have one more. Just as the mother of a vegetarian, I would be curious to see if you're seeing any kind of plant-based barbecue in this, or is it just such a, we don't talk about impossible barbecue world? Because the rest of my family, we're talking about culture. We're like, oh, let's do barbecue, and we always have Kylie's like, that's salad night again for me, So is there any hope? Or
Sure, there is. We even have a few vegans who have infiltrated our ranks. We won't talk about that. We love them. We love them all. There is Impossible Barbecue. There's jackfruit that mimics pulled pork. It is very popular. That's not something that we have on our menu. I'll never say never, but it's not going to be an immediate need for us. We're still pretty meat and potatoes in Southern Illinois, and not a lot of people just requesting that. In our catering world, we get lots of requests for vegetarian options. We do some delicious smoked portobello mushrooms that are filled with cheese and vegetables. We have a vegetable lasagna. We certainly have lots of side dishes, although many of our side dishes, like our green beans, are seasoned with brisket and other meats, because of course that makes everything better.
Yes.
So,
But somebody out there cares about it.
so there are people absolutely care about it, and you know, we do have some things on our menu people can eat. We haven't necessarily catered to that group yet, but never say never.
I have another virtual question from Nita. Amy, do you see another book on the horizon?
Oh, Nita, you want me to come to Atlanta and have another big book party?
That's your agent.
That's my best college friend. Her sister is sitting right back here. She's the godmother to my son, and I'm the godmother to her son, one of her sons. I probably have one more book in me, but I write the books myself. It really takes a lot out of me. My tears and blood are on every page. So I'm not going to be doing that anytime soon, but I probably have one more in me.
All right, we have time for one more question. Any more questions? Oh, hands back over.
Okay.
Thank you for being such a lively, interesting group.
Let's give
Such a
Amy
pleasure.
another round of applause. Absolutely amazing. I think we've all learned so much from Amy this evening. I took several pages of notes, but
Thank you.
some of the things that really stuck out to me were evolve, innovate, be generous. We're blessed to be a blessing to others. Be a life learner. Do volunteer work and pay it forward. And how can I help really resonated, because at Lindenwood, that's our cue too. It's like, what do you need and how can I help? So you were the perfect speaker for us to have this evening, and we just want to thank you on behalf of Plaster School of Business, on behalf of our president, all of our faculty and staff and students. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you so much for having us. Classmate who came, and my son who accompanied me, and of course, Miss Molly, who invited me to begin with.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you, and I just, before anyone leaves, I want to bring your attention, don't forget Thursday, October 21st, we have another wonderful panel of 3 or 4, a moderator and 4 speakers, Jennifer Bordeaux, probably, Bordeaux, Kate Morrison, Riona Wise, and Kate Redford, talking about the book that they all have chapters in called Owning Your Grit. So that should be really, really inspiring and motivational. So we hope to see you at 11:15 here, same place, same station, same channel, 11:15 to 12:45. And thank you all for coming this evening. Have a great and safe trip home.